Let's talk tonguing on the piccolo. First of all, the tongue placement. Basically, it's however you say the word to. I'm going to the store, so to. And I guess my tongue would go, when I'm actually tonguing, is slightly back from where I would normally say to, like the tiniest bit back. And then the other thing where the tongue is hitting on the roof of my mouth is, it's like you have the space right between your teeth, and then you have that ridge, and my tongue is like on the front part of that ridge. Yeah, so if you just sort of like take your tongue and kind of explore around up there at the roof of your mouth, and you have like right behind your teeth, and then take your tongue back, and then right before it goes up the ridge or over the ridge, right there is where I'm tonguing. But let me demonstrate what it sounds like, and so you might be able to identify what your particular issue is. If I tongue too far forward, it's almost like you're tonguing with a lisp, because the tongue, if it's too far forward, in my opinion, it gets in the way of the airstream, and it's like, you get like the TH sound instead of a T. And then if it's too far back, then you kind of get a strangled, then your throat is probably closing, and you get kind of a strangled sound. It's not as obvious, it's just very uncomfortable. When you have a heavy tongue, tonguing with too much of the width of the tongue, it's actually, the action is very heavy as well. So this like, my tongue, when I think about it, what it's doing is just the tip of my tongue, more or less, is hitting the roof of the mouth, or right in front of that ridge that we have. And once I tongue, then the tongue goes down. So it's like, so the airspeed can get through. I really believe that the airstream, our use of it, being too wide or too much, too fast, too slow, something, is 98% of any tonguing or articulation problems we may have on the piccolo specifically. So generally speaking, the airstream on the piccolo, as you probably already know, but needs to be faster than on the flute. The width of your airstream needs to be very narrow. And that does not mean anything's tight in here, or certainly not in the throat. Everything's very loose and the aperture is very small. But that airstream just needs to be so much narrower than how we do on the flute. How that relates to your articulation or your tonguing is like, the best analogy that I can think of is like, if you have to, let's say, run through water, some like puddles, or that much water, not too much, with your, with kind of like keeping your knees up. So you're kind of like running with your knees up through the water. You can get through the water pretty quick. So like your feet would be your tongue, and the water is your airstream. But if you try to run through like 3 feet of water, well, let's just even say 1 or 2 feet of water, like you can't do it. You're just like ta ta ta. And a complaint could be like, oh, it's just my feet. I have really heavy feet. Like, no, it's the water, it's the amount of water. So I think that transferred, I'm sure there's a much better analogy, but that's just what I thought of just now. Anyway, so that amount of water is your airstream. You cannot articulate clearly and cleanly on a ton of air. So that airstream, just doing C major scale, is in proportion to the instrument. I do want to make sure to, because I tell students that and they just like, like choke up your airstream. You don't want to do that. Everything is just miniature, but very open and loose. If I play something, I'll do Stars and Stripes. I'll do a little 8 bars or something with, again, that wide airstream where the air speed is not going fast enough. And like my notes will come out, but it just sounds kind of like spread. And I'll do kind of like a heavy tonguing too, because I should also say you can only do a heavy tonguing if you have too much air, because your tongue has to like get through all that air. So if that sounds like the kind of tone you're getting, then your airstream is too wide and then too slow, and the tongue is just too flappy. Another thing is if your tongue, while you're tonguing, does not come down out of the airstream path, you will get that interference. I'm just gonna play a D, the first note of Stars and Stripes, and just hold it and tongue it, but then like not take my tongue out of the way of the airstream. So it's hard to think about this when we're tonguing fast, but we just have to slow everything down, kind of see what's happening with our mechanics. So anyway, I'll tongue the D and then leave my tongue kind of in the way. So it's just like in the airstream rather than. So I'm gonna try to actually get my tongue to come up into the airstream while I do Stars and Stripes. See if what that sounds like. Like that, because I was like tripping over my tongue. And to do that, I really had to have my tongue very far forward so it could just flap around in the airstream. Another thing that I would mention is that when you have like your double tonguing or very rapid tonguing, or is to keep the air moving through those notes. So the air is still going very fast. A few exercises to get you started anyway, and then experimenting with placement of tongue, is to say just the word poo, P-O-O, for example. And not, I guess don't say the word poo, but just blowing enough air with your lips closed that part the lips naturally. So just leave your lips closed and then do a poo motion, and whatever naturally parts the lips, whatever amount of air naturally parts the lips, just enough. It's still going to be too big of an aperture for the piccolo, but if you do poo and even play a note going, so no tongue, and then do a so I'm going poo and then two. Or another analogy that's been taught a lot to beginner flute players to get their first sound out is the idea of spitting out 1 grain of rice and 1 grain only. So, just like that keeps the aperture small. So that's another way to think about it. Back to the tongue. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned the tongue needs to be, if you put your tongue right behind your teeth where you can still kind of feel your teeth, the backside of your teeth, and then go like that much back from there, and it's like right on that ridge. Yeah, there's like a ridge that goes kind of down. It's the front part of that ridge. But again, I mean, I could tongue all over the place in my mouth and it's still okay. I went back and forward with my tongue. Basically, it's fine. You still get an okay tone. So again, the issue is that is the air able to get through after you've tongued, and is your airstream fast enough? And all those other things, not too wide. So I hope some of that, what I went over, was helpful. I did look online to see if I could find any other YouTube videos that went over tonguing specifically on the piccolo, and there's really nothing. So if anyone has any other exercises that they would like to link to pass on the word for this issue, I did find one by Tara, I think it's Rosinski is her last name. I will link that video in the description. That seemed to be pretty good. Please subscribe if you have not already. I have a handful of videos on general piccolo practice, tone exercises for high, middle, and low register, orchestral excerpts, practice guides, things like that. So you might be interested to go back and watch some of those videos. Thanks for watching this video, and happy practicing.